Okay, this is a video answer key for lesson 9.6, number 2. Okay, on the first one here, we have got A, B, and C. So A is 3, B is 6, and C is 3. So we've got x equals the opposite of B, so negative 6 plus or minus B squared, 6 squared, minus 4 times A times C, all divided by 2A. Alright, so let me get the calculator right here. So we've got 6 squared minus 4 times 3 times 3. And I end up with a 0 on the inside there. So I have negative 6 on top, plus or minus the square root of 0 divided by 6. Now the square root of 0 just goes away, so really I just have negative 6 divided by 6, or x equals negative 1. Okay, going on to the next one here. Now remember that you have to set this equal to 0. So you get 8x squared, bring that 2x over here in the middle. It's got to be in standard form. So you're going to add 2x plus 11 equals 0. And again, A is 8, B is 2, and C is 11. So now we've got x equals the opposite of B, so negative 2, plus or minus the square root of B squared, so 2 squared minus 4 times A, which is 8, times C, which is 11, all over 2 times 8, or, sorry, 2A. Okay, so now on the inside here, I end up with negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 348 divided by 16. So now since I have a negative inside that square root, this guy right here, that's no good. All right, so if you have a negative inside the square root, that means that you're going to end up with no solution. Okay. All right, number 3. All right, A, B, and C are already set up for us. So A is 4. Now the negative 1, remember it's a negative 1, that's your B, and then negative 68 is your C value. So we've got x equals 1 plus or minus square root of B squared, so negative 1 squared, minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. Okay, all right, so typing inside my square root here, I end up with 1 plus or minus the square root of 1089 divided by 8. Okay, now I'm going to see if that 1089 will reduce. It does, it's exactly 33. So I get x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 30, or sorry, plus or minus 33 divided by 8. All right, so now go ahead and break that up into your two answers here. You've got 1 plus 33 divided by 8, and you've got 1 minus 33 divided by 8. So on this one, we've got 34 eighths. Now, you can't leave it as 34 eighths. You have to go ahead and reduce that 17 fourths. If you take 17 divided by 4, that would also be 4.25. I don't care which way you write it. Those would be the same. So this or this. Okay, on this one, I end up subtracting on the top there, and I get x equals negative 32 divided by 8. So then when I divide, I end up with negative 4. And those are your two solutions here. Okay, number 4. Again, set it equal to 0. So let's bring that 18 over to this side. So I'm going to have 2p squared plus 12p minus 18 equals 0. So A is 2, B is 12, and then C is negative 18. So x equals the opposite of B, so negative 12 plus or minus 12 squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A, or 2 times 2. So typing inside my calculator here, or inside the square root, sorry, typing into my calculator from inside that square root, I get 288. So x equals negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 288 divided by 4. Okay, and then when I square root 288, I end up with 12 root 2. So negative 12 plus or minus 12 root 2 over 4. Okay, now again, if you don't have a calculator that breaks this down, then you're going to need to go ahead and break this down. So this will go to 2 and 144, and then 144 will technically go to 12 and 12. You could stop there and circle them and move them out. Okay, if you want to break that 12 down, you can keep going, but you can't stop since you have a pair of 12s. Okay, now on this guy, remember, if you can reduce your three outside numbers, you need to go ahead and do that. So in this case, I can pull a 4 out of all of those. So I'm going to go, oops, wrong one there. I'm going to go ahead and pull a 4 out and get -3 plus or minus 3 root 2. And technically it's over a 1. You don't have to put the 1 on the bottom. You can if you want. It doesn't really matter. So now in this case, this is your exact solution. Now you're going to need to type that into your calculator to find out what your approximate is. Okay, so on my first one here, again, you're going to have to kind of break it up. You'll have -3 plus 3 root 2, and you'll have -3 minus 3 root 2. So on the top one there, I'm getting 1.2 when I round that off. Okay, so again, this is your exact, right? It's got a square root in it. That's your exact. This guy right here is going to be one of your approximates. So I've got -3 minus 3 root 2. When I put that in my calculator, I get -7.2. And so these two guys right here are your approximate solutions, okay? All right, number 5, go ahead and set equals 0. It doesn't really matter which way you move it. I have a tendency to always move this guy over to here because I try to leave that n squared positive. So I'll have n squared minus 7n minus 15 equals 0. So now I've got A is a 1, right? There's an A up front is your 1. B is -7, and C is -15. So x equals the opposite of b, so 7 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -7 squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times 1. So x equals 7 plus or minus the square root. Okay, so type this in here inside your inside the square root there. And I gotta end up with 109. Divided by 2. So now when I put the square root of 109 in my calculator, it just spits out the square root of 109. So this is your exact solution because 109 cannot be broken down. So now you need to go ahead and break it up into 7 plus the square root of 109, divide that by 2, and then 7 minus the square root of 109 and divide that by 2. So 7 plus the square root of 109 divided by 2 ends up being 8.7. And then I'm going to take 7 minus the square root of 109, divide it by 2, and I end up with -1.7 when I do that. Okay, so these guys right here are your approximate, and this guy right here is your exact. Okay, all right. Okay, so on this guy, we're going to need to go ahead and subtract the 7 over, and I get 2p squared minus 4p minus 48 equals 0. So I've got A is 2, B is -4, and C is -48. So x equals the opposite of B, so 4 plus or minus the square root of -4 squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A or 2 times 2. Okay? All right, so now let's go ahead and type on the inside there. So on the that's not gonna work. So on the inside here, I'm getting 400. So x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 400 divided by 4. Now the square root of 400 is 20. So we end up with 4 plus or minus 20 over 4. And now let's break it up to get our two answers. So we get 4 plus 20 divided by 4. And we end up with 4 minus 20 and divide that by 4. So 24, right? 24 divided by 4 is 6. And on the second one here, we have -16 divided by 4 is -4. Okay? All right, let's go to the second page here. All right, our discriminant. So remember, that's inside our square root. So it's going to be b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to end up with 6 squared minus 4 times -3 times -3. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and type that into my calculator. And I end up with 0. So if you have 0 inside that square root, you're going to get one solution. Okay, one solution. All right, this guy's already set equal to 0 as well. So b squared, again, I'm doing b squared minus 4ac. So 2 squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 9. So now I'm going to type into my calculator there, and I end up with 256. So since 256 is a positive inside that square root, that should give you 2 solutions. Oops. All right, and that's your answer. Okay, so moving on to number 9, we need to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 2 over and get 4r squared minus 9r plus 2 equals 0. Now again, I'm using b squared minus 4ac, so I have negative 9 squared. Again, note it's in parentheses because it's a negative. Minus 4 times a, which is 4, and c is 2. So now I'm going to go ahead and type in my calculator here. And I end up with 49. Again, since this is a positive inside that square root, that's going to give you 2 solutions. 2 solutions. Okay. All right, on this one to find the discriminant, we're going to have to go ahead and set equal to 0. So I'm going to add that 6 over and get 4p squared plus 4p plus 6 equals 0. All right, and then b squared minus 4ac, so 4 squared minus 4 times 6. All right, so we're going to type it into the calculator there. And I got negative 80 when I did that. And so I'm going to end up with no solutions here. There are 0 solutions because you have a negative inside the square root. And so since you have a negative inside the square root, that means you can get no answers. All right, on this one, Lupe tosses a ball up to Kevin, waiting at a 3rd-story window. The equation represents the height h of a ball after t seconds. If the ball must reach a height of 25 feet for Kevin to catch it, does the ball reach Kevin? Hint, use the discriminant to solve. Now, in this case, though, since this is our finishing height, we want to know if it's going to reach 25. We're going to put 25 in right there. Okay, so I have got 25 equals negative 16t squared plus 30t plus 6. Now you do need to go ahead and set it equal to 0. So negative 16t squared plus 30t minus 19. Okay, so now the discriminant will tell us whether or not we're going to have any answers. So that'll tell us whether or not it's actually going to make it up to 25 feet. So now using your b squared minus 4ac, I get 30 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times negative 19. Okay, so now go ahead and plug that in to your calculator, and I got negative 316. That's not so good. Can't have a negative inside the square root, which means it's never actually going to hit 25 feet. It might get 23, it might get 24, but it cannot get 25. So the question was, does it reach them? So the answer will be no. Okay, and that's because you have a negative discriminant. All right. So from a height of 256 feet above the lake of a cliff, Mary throws a rock out over the lake. The height h of the rock, t seconds after Mary throws it, is represented by the equation. To the nearest tenth of a second, how long does it take the rock to reach the lake below? Hint, since we're talking about the lake below, our finishing height will be 0. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 32t, and then our start height was at 256. Now, since it's already set equals 0, that's fabulous, but I do need to go ahead and start working the quadratic here. So I'm going to have x equals negative 32 plus or minus the square root of 32 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 256. All over 2 times negative 16. Now, since this is a real world problem and they're asking you to round to the nearest tenth, all I'm going to do is come up with decimals. I'm not going to worry about trying to simplify square roots and all that in this. Now, I am going to go ahead, though, and type in 32 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 256. And so I'm going to end up with x equals negative 32 plus or minus the square root of 17,408 divided by negative 32. Now, like I said, for that 17,408, I am not breaking that down. I'm just going to come up with an answer there. I get negative 32 plus or minus, and I got 131.9 divided by negative 32. Okay, now let's go ahead and break that up. So we get negative 32 plus 131.9 divided by negative 32. And we have negative 32 minus 131.9 divided by negative 32. All right, so on the first one here, negative 32 plus 131.9 is 99.9 divided by negative 32 is going to give me negative 3.1. Now, since we're talking about, the question is, I believe, let me go back here and look. Yeah, how long? There's no way for this to work, okay? You can't go negative 3.1 seconds. So let's check the other guy out. So I got negative 32 minus 131.9. I'm going to divide that by 32. And on this one, I end up with x equals negative 5.1 when I work that out. Oh, no, sorry, positive. Try that again. Positive 5.1 when I work that out. And so 5.1 seconds would be your answer, because that makes sense. And that concludes this video.